Let's go through a lesson today on Introduction to Rotations. So first off, let's talk about what a rotation is. So a rotation is a rigid transformation. That means it stays the same. It's not going to be flexible. It's not going to change shape. It's a rigid transformation or isometric transformation. And that just means that it's going to keep its shape. It's not going to change the size of the shape. A rotation also moves every point of the pre-image through an angle of rotation around the center of rotation to create a new image. So for example here, we have this image, and what we've done is notice we've rotated it around a rotation point. Here's our central rotation point here. And we've created this new image over here. Now there's a great pattern that we're going to be able to use to be able to know how to do that, so that way just not by guessing on the graph where it's going to be, we can mathematically do this quickly. So when we have rotations in the coordinate plane, there's a few things that we need to have. So rotations require to have a center of rotation. That means there's a specific point where the object is going to be rotated around. And then we also have to have an angle of dilation or of rotation. So that means we could be rotating, if we're rotating from quadrant 1 to quadrant 2, that would be 90 degrees counterclockwise. Or if we're rotating to quadrant 3 from quadrant 1, that would be 180 degrees, and that would either be clockwise or counterclockwise, because either way we go, if we're rotating 2 quadrants out of the 4, we're going halfway. So either counterclockwise or clockwise would get us to the same place. Or we could be rotating from quadrant 1 to quadrant 4, and if we went this way, we would be going 90 degrees clockwise, or if we went this way, we would be going 270 degrees counterclockwise. So we have to pay attention. Are we going counterclockwise or are we going clockwise? So those are important keys to pay attention to. Rotations preserve their angle of measures, and they also, their side lengths are going to stay the same. They're not shrinking, they're not enlarging, they're going to stay the same. So notice here, we've got point D here. We're rotating it, and we're rotating it 90 degrees, and our D prime ends up being over here. So our D's and our D prime, those are matched together. Same with our A's and our A prime, our B and our B prime. So those all match together, and the A, B, C, and D are the original image, or what we call the pre-image. And if it has the prime, which looks like an apostrophe, that's called A prime, B prime. Those are the image that it's creating after it rotates. Okay, so there's some rules for rotation, and these are super important. So taking notes are key, because math is just about patterns. Having these 2 pieces of information in your notes would be very helpful. So this right here is just a reminder of the quadrants and how the coordinate system works. So we have quadrant 1, and we know in quadrant 1, our signs are going to be positive, positive, because it's positive on the x-axis, positive on the y-axis. For the next quadrant, quadrant 2, we're going to have a negative, positive coordinate points, because we're going to the left on the x-axis, but we're still going up on the y-axis. So we're going to have a negative, positive coordinate point. In quadrant 3, we have a negative, negative, because we're going left on the x-axis and we're going down on the y-axis. So our coordinate is going to be negative, negative. And then finally, with quadrant 4, we're going to have a positive, negative, because we're going positive on the x-axis and we're going down on the y-axis. So that's just a reminder for you about the coordinate system and about the different quadrants, and then how our signs change depending on what quadrant we're in. Super helpful piece of information. The next really key thing for doing rotations is this chart. And I refer to this chart all the time because I don't have this memorized. I don't have to have it memorized. I can have this in my notes and I can refer to it when needed. So this is a really key piece of information because depending on the rotation it tells you to go through, it's going to tell you how to change your quadrants. So for instance, or change your coordinates, excuse me. For rotation of 90 degrees clockwise, the point on the pre-image, so remember the pre-image is the original image. So for rotation of 90 degrees clockwise, it's going to be x comma y. X comma y. When we rotate it 90 degrees clockwise, it's now going to change to y negative x. So we're flipping the coordinates and we're throwing the opposite sign on the new y value, which is negative x of our original. So for example, if our original image was 1, 2, if we wanted to rotate that clockwise 90 degrees, we would follow our pattern. So since our x was 1, our x is where our x is now going to be negative 1, which is our new y point. And our y, which was 2, is now going to be our new x value. So our point would be 2, negative 1. That would be the image of the pre-image, okay, after rotating. Let's try another one. So rotation of 90 degrees, now the opposite way, counterclockwise. So if we're going to take this counterclockwise, let's say we have the same coordinate point, 1, 2. Instead of switching and throwing an opposite sign on the x value, we're going to throw the opposite sign on the y value. So if we started with 1, 2, and we go to our pattern here, now we want to put just x, so that's going to be right there in our y value. And we're going to have negative y as our new x value. So our original y was 2, so it's going to be negative 2, 2. That would be our image point. So far so good? If not, just pause and rewind and go back through that again. Let's try another one. So now let's rotate 180 degrees. So now we're going to rotate 180 degrees. And remember I said it doesn't matter if you're going counterclockwise or if you're going clockwise with rotation. Because since there's 4 quadrants, if you're rotating 180 degrees, you're rotating 2 quadrants. So that's halfway on both directions. So again, we're starting with x, y. We'll do our 1, 2 example here. And we're going to follow our pattern. Our pattern for this now is negative x, negative y. So I'm going to keep my x and y values in the very same locations, but now I'm going to change their sign. So now my image point is negative 1, negative 2 for that rotation. You're doing awesome. Stay with me. You're doing great. Math is all about patterns. Take notes on these examples and you're going to be able to do these just fine. Let's try rotation of 270 degrees clockwise. So that means we're going to go 3 quadrants in the clockwise direction. Again, we start with our original point, our pre-image point, 1, 2. That's our example we're using for this. To find this image of rotating 270 degrees clockwise, we're going to switch the pattern to negative y, x. So if you notice, that's the same as our rotation of 90 degrees counterclockwise. So there's a pattern there. So if we change these, our original was 1, 2. Oops, excuse me for that. Little glitch there, apologies. So it's 1, 2. So if we're going to make our pre-image or our image after rotation, we're going to take our y value and put it in the first, and we're going to change the sign. So we're going to have a negative 2. And our x value, which is now going in the second location, the y placeholder, we're going to put 1. So that one would be -2, 1. Okay? So our last one is if we want to go ahead and we want to rotate 270 degrees counterclockwise. So we're starting with XY, which for our example is 1, 2. And what we're making our image to be, the pattern is going to be Y, -X. So we take our Y value from the original coordinate. So our Y value originally was 2. That's now going to be our X value. And our Y value for the image is going to be -X. So our original was 1. So we're going to make that a -1. So now our rotated point would be 2, -1. This chart is super helpful. It's super important to use this. It helps make this easier for you, and that way, let's work harder. Let's not work harder, let's work smarter, okay? All right, let's try an example with our chart. I've transferred our chart over here so we have it right in front of us, and we're given an example to rotate this image 90 degrees clockwise, and we're going about the image point right here. 0, 0 is our image point here. So we're going to rotate clockwise. So let's look at our points. So let's call this A, B, C. And we want to list out what our coordinates are. Our coordinates, so this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? So our coordinates for point A, we go over 1 and up 4. So our coordinates are 1, 4. For B, we're going over 4 and up 4. So our coordinate is 4, 4. And then for C, the pre-image C, we're going over 4 and up 2. So our coordinate is 4, 2. So now we're looking for clockwise. Clockwise 90 degrees. So we're looking right here. Rotation 90 degrees clockwise. We're starting with our XY and we're changing it to Y -X for this example. So all of our original points we're going to now rearrange to have the pattern of Y -X. So let's do that. So if our A is 1, 4, that means our A prime is going to be, we're going to put our Y value first, which is 4, and we're going to change the sign on our X. So it's a +1, so now it's going to be a -1. So there's our value for the image rotated for A prime. So our B value was 4, 4. So if we follow our pattern here of Y -X, our Y now becomes our first value, which is 4. And our X is a 4 also because they were both 4s, 4, 4. But notice, remember we have to change the sign. So our B prime is 4, -4. Then our C was originally 4, 2. When we transform this through the rotation to our C prime, we are going to see again our Y value is going to be our X value. And then our X now becomes a -X value for our Y portion of that coordinate. So now we have found that this would be our rotated image. And then we would just plot it out and we would be good to go. Let's try one more. So again, I've provided our pattern here, our chart that tells us how to transform these mathematically without having to necessarily try to figure out it on the graph. So we're rotating this time counterclockwise about the origin. So that means we're going to go under. So counterclockwise would be right here. So let's go ahead and find the coordinates of our original image. So again, we can call these A, B, C. Doesn't matter what you call them. You can call them whatever you'd like. We'll just go by ones. We don't have to go by any other different scale. So our coordinates for A would be 1, 3. Our coordinates for B would be 2, 3. And our coordinates for C are 2, 2. So now we're going to find what the rotated coordinates would be to find A prime, B prime, C prime for this image. Rotating it counterclockwise 90 degrees. So counterclockwise, we're going to go this way. All right, so counterclockwise, this is the pattern we're looking for. Our pattern is negative y, x. All right, so we're going to take our y value for A, and we're going to change the sign and put that for our new x value. Our new y value is going to stay the same as our original x value. So this just stays negative 3, 1. That is our rotated image. So that's our A prime. So B, we have 2, 3. We're going to change it to negative y, positive x. So we're going to take the y value, make it negative, and our x value stays the same when we rotate it over to the y position. That is now our B prime coordinate. Lastly, we have our C, and we're given that it's 2, 2. So we're going to follow the same pattern. We're going to change that into negative yx. So we're going to take the y and now make it negative, and that's our new x value. Take our original x value, put it in the y position, and do not change the sign. That's our C prime position. And these are our coordinates now for our new image. And if it asked us to graph it, we can go ahead and do that as well. So we're just going to plug in, and we'll use a different color to show the different shape here, the different rotation. So negative 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to go up 1. So here's our A prime. Our B prime is negative 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. So here's our B prime. And our C prime is negative 2, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. There's our C prime. We connect our coordinates, and we have now rotated this original image in quadrant 1 to our new image in quadrant 2. Okay, let's work out one more example here. So again, I've got our chart and I've got our pre-image over here. So this time we're going to rotate 180 degrees about the origin. So 180 degrees, and we're going to rotate it about the 0, 0 coordinate. All right, so rotation of 180 degrees is this place on our chart. So we're going to identify our coordinate points, and then we're going to make the pattern switch. So we've got A, B, C, D. And my A value, my A coordinate, is negative 5, 4. My B coordinate is negative 1, 4. My C coordinate is negative 2, 1. And my D coordinate is negative 4, positive 1. Okay, so now we're going to make the transformation. And the transformation we're going to make is we're going to switch all the coordinates in the pre-image to negative x, negative y, and that will give us our rotated image. So let's do that. So now we're going to have A prime. We're going to keep the numbers in the same spots. We're just going to change their signs. So a negative 5 is a positive 5. And 4 adding a negative, we have a negative 4. So there's our A prime coordinate. For B prime, again, we're just flipping the signs, keeping the numbers the same. So when we flip these signs, this now becomes a positive and this becomes a negative. Let's get that out of there so it doesn't look like a negative. Our C prime position, we're keeping the numbers, flipping the signs. So a negative 2 goes to a 2 and a positive 1 goes to a negative 1. And finally, our D prime image, again, we're keeping the numbers the same. We're just flipping the signs. So our negative 4 becomes a positive 4 and our positive 1 becomes a negative 1. So now that we have our pre-image points, we can go ahead and graph those. So let's go ahead and do that. So our A prime is now going to be at positive 5, 4, positive 5, negative 4. So here's our A prime. Our B prime is at positive 1, negative 4. So there's our B prime. Our C prime is at positive 2, negative 1. So there's our C prime. And our D prime is at 4, -1. So we go over 4, down 1. And there's our D prime. So we connect our coordinates. And we now have our rotated image. You guys have done a great job. I really hope that these examples have helped. Remember, math is just patterns. If you have examples of these patterns, you can do these problems.